This is All India Radio. In the program Samvaad, we now bring you a discussion on 3rd G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting. The participants are Shishir Sinha, Economic Analyst, and AIR Correspondent Renu Kataria.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman says digital taxation needs to be inclusive and simple and that there should be need to consensus-based solution. Why is this important, sir?
Digital taxation, or what we call as the equalization levy, it is being debated at various forums. And this particular forum, why this particular issue is important, if you take the composition of G20, so out of G20 countries, there are 7 countries against whom United States has initiated an investigation. And those 7 countries are also participating, including the United States. So this is the forum where the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman are for a simple solution, which is a consensus-based solution. And that is very, very important because USTR, that the United States Trade Representative, when it initiated the investigation, it said that the taxes are being levied against United States companies and it is not fair. All the countries have said very firmly, including India, that this is not something which is purely against US companies, but against all the companies. It is being imposed on companies belonging to all other countries. So this forum, when the United States is also present and when the other member countries are also present, against whom the USTR has initiated investigation, that is why Finance Minister used the word simple, and also they said that a consensus-based solution is required on this forum.
So there is also this word equalization which is being debated at the international forum. Why is this given so much of importance and what is India's stand on this?
India has submitted its response to USTR. The last date was July 15th and accordingly India submitted its representation. And it said that it is not against any particular company. This tax is being levied on companies belonging to all other countries, all the companies. Now, you need to understand what is equalization levy. Equalization levy, the concept of equalization levy, which is also popularly known as the Google tax, it was first imposed in 2016 and it was basically on the ads on various digital companies. In this budget, 2020-21 budget, the government expanded it to non-resident e-commerce companies. And any company who is earning more than 2 crore rupees in a year, it will have to pay equalization levy at the rate of 2%. A number of lobby groups pitched for deferment of this levy before the Finance Ministry, and unfortunately for them and good for the government of India, that it didn't defer that taxation. And July 1 was the first installment date and many companies have deposited this money. Now this matter is debated because United States is initiating action against all the 10 companies which have initiated digital taxation in India, what we call as the equalization levy. And when we are discussing agenda for international taxation, simple and logical based taxation solution, the discussion on equalization levy becomes the focus of this discussion. And that is what it was discussed in the meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors.
Addressing the tax challenges arising from the digitalization of the economy is also one of the primary concerns of emerging economies. What are your views on this?
Digital taxation is something which is always a kind of debatable issue. Whom we should tax? Whether we should tax all the digital. See, when we are talking about digital transaction, it doesn't believe in any kind of boundary. It will be a boundaryless transaction. So it is always a question that who is the ultimate beneficiary and whom we need to tax. There are something called, which we know as the double taxation avoidance agreement between countries. Say India has double taxation agreement with almost 82 countries, and it says that we will not tax or that particular company will need to pay tax in just one country. So this kind of arrangement is there. So digital taxation, when the digital transactions are going on, and especially during this COVID pandemic area, this issue has become very, very important. It's very, very critical, and that is why in the G20 meeting, it is being discussed in detail.
talking about technology-based financial inclusion where contactless cash transfers of over $10 billion were harnessed into the bank accounts of around 420 million people has been an achievement of the government. Can you discuss some more achievements like how India's experience can be used in developing and emerging economies giving maximum benefit?
You talked about the transfer of money through digital means. We know Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, which has people, which has account holder. Earlier, they didn't have any kind of bank account. And now money is being transferred in their bank account. It is also said that when the government is starting any program or government is transferring some kind of benefit, that money, if it is going directly into the bank account of beneficiary, it will have a 100% effect. And that is what the government is pushing on the G20 platform. When we talk about G20, it talks about, if you take the members country, it is almost 80% of world economic output, 2/3 of global population and 3/4 of global trade. So considering the size and considering the value of this particular organization, it needs to be seen that how experience of one or two or many of the G20 nations can be implemented in various other countries, which are, say, developing countries or which are, say, very least developed countries. So India is pushing forward all its program of transaction executed through digital means on this platform so that it becomes an example for the least developed countries or the poor countries.
The G20 finance officials also said that 42 of the world's 73 poorest countries have requested a freeze in official bilateral debt payments through the end of the year, amounting to about $5.3 billion in deferred payments. So in today's scenario, what will be the relevance of this and what impact if these steps are taken on the issue?
This particular issue is a part of communique issued after a meeting of finance ministers and central bank governors. And it says that under Debt Service Suspension Initiative, which we call as the DSSI, 42 countries have requested to benefit from the DSSI, and this amount to almost 5.3 billion, as you rightly said. Now, the International Monetary Fund and World Bank they are also going to support in this particular program. See, when we are talking about COVID pandemic, we all know that entire global economy is in shambles. Entire global economy is facing a lot of problems. And when we talk about least developed economies or the developing economies or even the emerging economies, they are having problems. We all know that global output for the current year is almost, it's going to be contracted by more than 3%. Next year, we are expecting some recovery. But in order to give support to the vulnerable countries like least developed countries or which are poorer countries, this kind of support like suspending the debt is very, very critical. And I think this particular initiative will help these countries to fight the pandemic in a much better way and also to get the economic strength at a faster pace than were expecting or what they were apprehending.
Mrs. Sitharaman also shared her perspective on the way forward on the action plan in the meeting and how much international support or cooperation is required for exit strategies to ensure it remains relevant and effective.
The action plan which was discussed in the month of April, that has been endorsed in that meeting, in the meeting which held yesterday. And now we are talking about progress of the action plan. And one of the key constituents of this action plan is that what should be the strategy for the exit. What we exactly mean by the strategy for exit? We all know that almost for last 3 or 4 months, entire world is facing global pandemic. And not just the developed countries like United States or some countries in Europe, they are facing problem on the economic front. The countries like those belonging to poorer countries, those belonging to least developed economies, they are in a worse state. So what kind of a strategy, what kind of support developed countries or these kind of multilateral organization can give? If you can remember, a day before yesterday when Prime Minister was talking to United Nations platform, he talked about multilateralism. And this is the time when the multilateralism is going to be very, very important, especially when we need to provide support not just to the poorer countries or the least developed economies, but also to the emerging economies and in some way or other to the developed economies.
This also leads to another question. What practical steps on resource mobilization and policy changes are required that will take humanity to a safer and healthier future?
this moment, more and more resources need to be spent on the health. Health is most important thing at this moment. I mean, you need to make a balance between health and the economic means. Sometimes people are saying that we also need to think about how economy will progress, how the resources will be generated. And in that regard, foreign direct investment or investment by richer countries in emerging economy is very, very important. And that is why we are talking about how there will be more and more resources flow, more and more capital flow from one country to other country, the country which has some resources and the country which is lacking some resources. So how that can be flown into that, whether it can be a kind of corporate arrangement or commercial arrangement, or will it be a humanitarian assistance? Because humanitarian assistance, the company or the country which is putting money into another country, they are not going to get anything. So how the balance can be set up, how the balance can be achieved in proper allocation of resources by way of putting capital for economic activity and by way of granting resources for health. In that way, we will be able to give support to the economy as well as to the health.
Spoken a lot about debt and debt suspensions. So what action needs to be taken on debt suspension, debt reduction, debt resolution mechanisms and debt transparency by the G20 countries?
Debt is something which every country has to carry for a longer period. I mean, at this moment, when more and more economies are facing resources crunch, they will try to get more and more debt. And there the role of IMF or the World Bank are very, very important. If you can remember, World Bank has also given number of assistance to India in form of debt. So even the country like ours are going to get debt from the international bodies. The countries which are very, very poor or the least developed ones, they are in a much bigger requirement of debt. And how that debt can be given, what kind of interest rate to be charged, what kind of terms and conditions will be there, whether there can be some kind of moratorium. I mean, moratorium means, can you defer repayment of debt for say 5 years or say for 7 years? That will help those countries to regain their strength and repay the debt. So these kind of things which are being discussed under the debt mechanism on this platform.
In the second session of the meeting, sir, the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors discussed the developments on G20 finance track deliverables, mentioning that this agenda has assumed greater importance now as the pandemic has most impacted the vulnerable sections. What policies were discussed and aimed at in the meeting towards this agenda?
When we are talking about deliverables, if you take what finance minister said, finance minister discussed two important deliverables. First one was related with enhancing access to opportunities for women, youth, and smaller and medium enterprises. And on the second one is about the taxation thing. Taxation we have discussed in detail. When we are talking about women, youth, and small and medium enterprises, I think the most critical is the small and medium enterprises. Take the example of India. What India has done, when India announced Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, that's the self-reliance thing, most important factor among that particular campaign was small, micro, small and medium enterprises. So we announced giving some kind of financial assistance. We also announced giving them some kind of support. We made some policy changes. So these are the things which are going to help the MSME. Just take the example of importance of MSME in Indian economy. More than 6.5 crore MSMEs are there. They are contributing almost 30% in our GDP. When we talk about export, they are contributing almost 45%. More than 11 crore people are employed with MSME. So we need to have a broader policy perspective for MSME. And that is why Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman highlighted when she talked about women, youth and SME. Among these three, MSME is very, very important. We need to think about how the economy will also progress, how the balance can be made between the health need and the economic need. If we are able to make a bridge between these two, that will be good for the economy, not just for India, but for the world.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You were listening to a discussion on 3rd G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting. The participants were Shishir Sinha, Economic Analyst, and AIR correspondent Renu Kataria. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.com. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.